Tonight, we're not here to fix anything, not to understand everything, not to become someone better before you're allowed to rest. This is a quiet space where we gently let go and return to inner peace through soft Zen stories inspired by the Buddha, shared slowly so your mind can soften and your body can rest. Maybe today asked a little too much from you. Too many thoughts, too many worries, too many small things you tried to hold together. And maybe, just for this moment, you're ready to set them down. Here, you don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to solve tomorrow. You are already enough simply by being here, breathing quietly. Just for a moment. Where are you listening from tonight? Wherever you are, I'm grateful you're here, sharing this quiet space. Let your breath slow, as if it remembers the way home. Let your shoulders soften, like they no longer need to carry the world. Tonight, we'll listen to a simple story. A story from ordinary life, carrying a small thread of Zen and Buddhist wisdom. Not to give you more to think about, but to help you loosen your grip. Because suffering rarely ends by force. It softens when we stop holding it so tightly. There's nothing to rush, nothing to achieve, only a gentle drifting into rest, into stillness. Whether you stay awake or slowly fall asleep, this moment is already enough. And now, we begin tonight's journey with these Zen stories. Fear doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as distance, a mind that keeps leaning forward, imagining everything that could go wrong, everything that hasn't happened yet. Your body might be standing still, but your thoughts are already far ahead, scanning the future, like it's a cliff you're about to fall from. Tyler learned this slowly. He was 34, a park ranger in a mountain region where people often came looking for quiet, but didn't always know what to do with it once they found it. That night, he was alone in the small ranger cabin, the kind with thick wooden walls and a single window facing the dark slope of the mountain. The wind moved through the trees outside, low and steady, not loud enough to be dramatic, just present. Tyler wasn't afraid of the mountain itself. He'd hiked it in every season. He knew the trails, the loose rocks, the places where snow stayed longer than expected. What unsettled him wasn't the terrain, it was the stretch of unknown ahead of him. A transfer request he hadn't answered yet, a relationship that felt like it was quietly changing shape. A future that didn't look dangerous, but didn't look clear either. He sat at the small table, boots still on, jacket unzipped. His headlamp rested beside his hand. He picked it up, turned it on, and pointed it toward the floor. The beam cut a clean circle of light over the wooden boards. Everything beyond that circle stayed dark. Tyler noticed something he'd known for years, but had forgotten to apply to himself. When you're climbing in the dark, you don't look down the mountain. You don't look for the summit either. You look for the next place to put your foot. That's it. One step, then another. Fear has a way of convincing you to look everywhere except where you are. His thoughts kept pulling him forward. What if this choice closes the wrong door? What if I regret it? What if I don't see the danger coming? Each question widened the imagined drop in front of him. The future became a vast space with no edges, no markers, no handholds. Tyler exhaled slowly and brought the light back down to the floor. The wood grain, a scratch near the leg of the chair, dust that would need to be swept in the morning. Ordinary things, solid things, the kind of details that don't disappear when you're afraid. Outside, the wind shifted. A branch tapped lightly against the cabin wall, then went still again. The mountain wasn't rushing him. The night wasn't demanding answers. He remembered his first winter climb years ago, how his instructor had stopped him mid-trail when Tyler froze staring down a steep slope. "Don't argue with the height," the man had said quietly. "Just place your foot." Back then it hadn't felt like wisdom. It had felt like survival. Now, sitting alone in the cabin, Tyler understood it differently. Fear wasn't asking him to solve his life. It was just asking for attention. And attention didn't mean obedience. He stood up, took a few steps toward the door, then paused. His hand rested on the handle. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He just needed to feel the weight of his body balanced upright here. There was something grounding about realizing that even if the path ahead changed, this step, this moment, was stable. The floor held him. The walls held the warmth. The night held everything else without explanation. Tyler turned off the headlamp and let the darkness return. It didn't feel threatening now. It felt wide, like a space that didn't need to be filled. Fear often imagines the worst possible version of tomorrow. But tomorrow never arrives all at once. It comes as moments, steps, small decisions made with the information you have, not the information you wish you had. Tyler sat back down. He unlaced his boots slowly, listening to the soft rasp of fabric and metal. When he finished, he lined them up by the door, neat but not perfect. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rehearse conversations that hadn't happened yet. He let the mountain be what it was, something large, something steady, something that didn't need him to conquer it tonight. Sometimes peace doesn't come from feeling brave. It comes from remembering that you're not required to see the whole path, only the ground beneath you. The wind outside softened. The cabin settled into its quiet creaks and pauses. Tyler leaned back in his chair and allowed his gaze to rest on nothing in particular. The next step could wait. For now, this one was enough. Later that night, the cabin grew quieter in a way Tyler could feel rather than hear. The wind didn't stop, it just became part of the background, like a low breath moving through the trees. The kind of sound you don't need to follow. The kind that keeps going whether you pay attention or not. Tyler lay back on the narrow bed near the wall. He didn't turn off the small lamp right away. Its light was soft, barely reaching the corners of the room, leaving most things in shadow. The ceiling above him was simple wood. Nothing to figure out, nothing to interpret. His mind tried once or twice to wander ahead again, to the transfer request, to the future version of himself that might look back and judge this moment. But the thoughts didn't have the same grip. They arrived without urgency, then drifted off, when nothing responded. He brought his attention to his body instead. The way the mattress supported his weight, the way his shoulders sank slightly once he stopped holding them up, the quiet rhythm of his breath already slower than before. In the mountains, Tyler knew panic often came from looking too far. People slipped not because the ground disappeared, but because their attention did. They leaned forward before their footing was secure. Fear works the same way in the mind. Tyler let that idea pass without holding on to it. He didn't need to turn it into ideas. He'd learned enough to know that understanding something didn't always mean doing something with it. Outside, a distant animal call echoed once, then faded. It didn't trigger alarm. It was just another reminder that the night had its own movements, its own language, one that didn't ask for interpretation. Tyler reached over and turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room, but not completely. There was still a thin outline of the window, a faint suggestion of trees beyond it. Enough to orient himself, enough to feel safe. He remembered how on night climbs, experienced climbers trusted their lights not to show the whole route, but to show enough. Enough rock, enough ground, enough information to take the next step without guessing. That was all the light was ever meant to do. Fear often demands certainty. It wants guarantees, full maps, complete explanations. But the body doesn't need all that to rest. The body only needs to know that right now, it's not falling. Tyler placed one hand on his chest, the other resting loosely at his side. His fingers were relaxed, not curled into fists. His breath moved in and out without effort, without correction. The mountain didn't ask him to decide anything tonight. The future didn't ask him to arrive early. There was a quiet relief in realizing that uncertainty wasn't a threat. It was simply space. Space where things hadn't formed yet. Space that didn't need to be filled with fear. Tyler's thoughts grew less specific. They lost their sharp edges, becoming more like impressions than sentences. The idea of tomorrow softened. The need to resolve anything faded into the background. He didn't tell himself to sleep. He didn't tell himself to relax. He just stayed with the steady feeling of being held by the bed. Stayed with the sound of wind passing through branches. Stayed with the simple fact of being here now, without needing to move. At some point, the distinction between listening and drifting began to blur. His awareness widened, then thinned like a beam of light slowly dimming. The path ahead would still be there in the morning. The choices would still wait. For now there was no cliff, only solid ground beneath him, only one step already taken, and that was enough to let the night carry the rest. The mirror didn't break loudly. Grace noticed it the next morning when the light from the porch hit the glass at an angle it didn't usually reach. A thin line ran across the corner, quiet and pale, like something that had happened while no one was watching. She stood there for a moment longer than necessary, holding her coffee, letting the kettle click off behind her. She didn't remember dropping it. She didn't remember a sound in the night. Just this line now here. Grace was 62, retired, the kind of person who noticed small things because life had finally slowed down enough to make room for them. She set the mug down, touched the edge of the mirror with one finger, careful not to press. The glass was still smooth. The crack didn't cut. It just interrupted. Later that evening, she carried the mirror out to the porch. The swing creaked gently as she sat down, the same sound it had made for years, steady and familiar. Crickets were already starting up in the yard. She rested the mirror against her knees, tilted slightly, catching the dim gold of the porch light. There had been a time when Grace would have thrown it out right away. Broken meant done. Replace it. Move on. But she didn't feel rushed tonight. She took a cloth from her pocket and wiped the surface slowly, not trying to fix anything, just clearing the dust. Her reflection fractured as she moved her face, appearing in pieces that didn't quite line up. It was strange how even a small break could change the whole image. Grace thought about how anger works the same way. It doesn't always come in shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it settles in quietly. It waits. It turns into distance, into silence, into the way you stop expecting anything good from someone without ever saying so out loud. She had been carrying that kind of anger for a long time. Not the explosive kind, the tidy kind. The kind you keep folded neatly, like a letter you never sent. Years ago, someone close to her had said something that couldn't be taken back. It wasn't dramatic. No betrayal, no shouting. Just a sentence that landed wrong and stayed there. A comment that made her feel small in a moment when she had trusted enough to be open. Grace never confronted it. She told herself it wasn't worth it, that she was being mature, reasonable. But the anger didn't disappear. It just hardened into something quieter. She adjusted the mirror on her lap. The crack caught the light again, more visible now. She wondered how many times she had replayed that moment in her head over the years, polishing it, turning it, letting it reflect different versions of the same hurt. Forgiveness had always sounded to her like pretending the crack wasn't there, like forcing the glass back into a shape it no longer had. She wasn't interested in that. The porch was cool now. A breeze moved through the trees, lifting the leaves just enough to make them whisper. Grace rested her hands on the frame of the mirror and let her shoulders drop. Not in a dramatic way, just enough to notice the weight she'd been holding. There's something exhausting about anger that doesn't get expressed. It stays active. It keeps checking the past, like it might change if you look at it one more time. It sharpens your memory. It edits your expectations. It makes the world feel a little harder than it needs to be. Grace hadn't realized how much of her energy had been leaking into that old moment until now, sitting here watching her reflections split and rejoin with every shift of light. She thought about what it would mean to fix the mirror. Not to make it invisible, not to erase the crack, but to let it exist differently. Years ago, she had seen a documentary about a Japanese art form, kintsugi, broken pottery repaired with gold. The cracks weren't hidden. They were traced, honored. The object wasn't restored to what it was before. It became something else, more honest, more deliberate. Grace smiled a little at the thought, not because it solved anything, just because it felt truer than the idea of going back to normal. She wasn't ready to forgive the way people usually talk about forgiveness. She didn't feel warm or generous. She didn't feel like reaching out. What she felt was tired. Tired of holding something sharp so carefully. She set the mirror down beside the swing and leaned back, letting it sway slightly. The rope creaked again. The sound filled the quiet in a way that didn't demand attention. For the first time in a long while, Grace considered this. Maybe forgiveness isn't about the other person at all. Maybe it's about changing how you carry what happened. The mirror, broken and still useful, waited beside her. It wasn't asking to be fixed tonight. It wasn't asking for a decision. It was just there. And for now, that was enough. Grace didn't try to repair the mirror that night. She left it leaning against the porch wall just inside the circle of light. Before going back into the house, she paused and looked at it once more. The crack was still there, clear and honest. Nothing had changed, and yet something had loosened. Inside the house felt quieter than usual. Not silent, just unburdened. Grace moved through the rooms without turning on extra lights. The familiar sounds followed her, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the hallway clock. Ordinary sounds, anchoring sounds. When she washed her hands at the sink, she noticed how warm the water felt against her skin. She let it run a second longer than necessary, watching it slip through her fingers and disappear down the drain. There was no rush to finish, no thought she needed to catch. Anger often convinces us that it's doing something useful, that it's protecting us, that if we keep it close, we won't be hurt again. But standing there, hands wet, shoulders relaxed, Grace could feel how heavy that protection had been, how much effort it took to keep it intact. She dried her hands, slowly folded the towel neatly, and set it back where it belonged. Small motions done without commentary. Her body seemed to know what to do before her mind tried to explain it. Later, lying in bed, Grace stared at the ceiling fan as it turned at its lowest setting. The air moved gently across her face. She didn't replay the old conversation tonight. She didn't rehearse a response she'd never send. The memory still existed somewhere inside her, but it no longer demanded center stage. That surprised her. Forgiveness, she realized, might not arrive as a decision. It might arrive as a quiet reduction. Less tension in the jaw, less replaying, less heat behind the eyes. Not gone, just less. The broken mirror stayed on the porch for days. Grace passed it every morning, every evening. Sometimes she caught her reflection in it, split by that thin line. Sometimes she didn't look at it at all. One afternoon, she brought out a small box from the hall closet. Inside were odds and ends she'd kept without knowing why: buttons, a loose earring, a tiny vial of gold-colored paint left over from a craft project years ago. She set the box down next to the mirror, then laughed softly at herself. Not today, she thought. There was no urgency to make it beautiful yet. What mattered more was that she had stopped seeing the crack as a failure. It was simply a record of pressure, of impact, of something that had met resistance and not fully broken. Grace rocked gently on the porch swing, eyes half closed. the air had cooled. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then settled. The world continued without commentary. Anger, when held for too long, keeps the body alert. It tightens muscles. It sharpens the mind. It makes rest feel undeserved. Tonight, rest came without negotiation. Grace didn't forgive anyone in a grand way. She didn't make peace with the past. She didn't rewrite the story. She just stopped gripping it so tightly. And in that small release, something softened. The night felt wider, the air easier to breathe. The broken mirror waited patiently, unchanged. When Grace finally stood up to go inside, she didn't feel the need to bring it with her. It could stay where it was imperfect and whole enough. Some things don't need fixing right away. Some things only need space. As the lights went out and the house settled into its familiar nighttime rhythm, Grace felt her breath slow on its own. No effort, no instruction, just the quiet relief of no longer holding something sharp. The night held everything else. Some evenings, Ben feels like his mind is a body of water that refuses to stay still. Not big waves, just small ripples, one after another, enough to keep him from seeing the bottom. And his familiar reflex almost immediately is to do something to smooth it out. Think more, organize more, check again. As if acting fast enough, precisely enough, will make the surface finally go quiet. Ben is 31, the founder of a small company that's growing very fast. His apartment that night is quieter than usual. The living room light is dimmed. His laptop is closed, placed neatly on the coffee table like an object that has finished its job for the day. But Ben hasn't. He stands by the glass table, a cleaning cloth in his hand, slowly wiping away faint smudges he's already cleaned at least twice. The cloth makes a very soft sound against the glass, almost unnoticeable. Still, Ben keeps going, side to side, up and down, turning the cloth, as if making the surface clear enough might calm the thoughts in his head as well. While his hands repeat this familiar motion, his mind stays busy with unanswered questions. Was today's decision the right one? Should that email have been sent with a different tone? Is this growth sustainable or just temporary luck? There's something strange about overthinking it. Rarely shows up as panic. It often arrives disguised as care, as responsibility, as wanting to do things well. Ben doesn't think he's anxious. He just thinks he's taking care of things, but his body knows otherwise. His shoulders are tight, his jaw slightly clenched, his breathing shorter than usual. He pauses and looks at the glass surface, now clean enough to reflect the light. In it, he sees his own reflection, soft, a little blurred, not sharp, not perfect. And a familiar thought appears: not enough, not clear enough, not solid enough, not calm enough. Ben keeps wiping, but the more he wipes, the more he notices new marks, not because the glass is dirtier, but because he's looking too closely. The harder he tries to smooth it out, the more tiny movements appear, the kind no one would normally notice. Like trying to iron the surface of a lake with a hot iron. Each touch doesn't flatten the water. It creates more movement spreading outward. He sets the cloth down on the table. It's only a brief moment, but long enough to realize he isn't standing there because the table is dirty. He's there because something in his mind is pushing him to intervene, to make everything okay right now, as if doing nothing would cause everything to slip out of control. Ben sits down on the sofa. He doesn't lean back right away. He just sits, elbows resting on his thighs, hands hanging loosely in the space between. A longer exhale escapes than he expects. Not a breath of relief, just the breath of a body tired from trying to keep the water calm all day. He looks around the room. Everything is still there. Nothing collapses when he stops cleaning the table. No email turns into a disaster. No decision becomes instantly wrong just because he stays still for a few extra seconds. The realization doesn't bring immediate ease, but it creates a very small opening. A pause between reflex and action. Maybe the problem isn't that the lake is too restless. Maybe it's that he won't let it settle on its own. Water, when it isn't stirred, has a natural way of returning to stillness. But that requires something Ben isn't used to: allowing time without control. He leans back this time and does nothing. No analyzing how he feels, no naming the state, just letting the quiet in the room spread. One thought drifts through, then another. He doesn't chase them. He doesn't push them away. He lets them come and go like small ripples that don't need to be flattened by hand. If you're listening and you recognize this habit of constantly intervening in your own mind, that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just using the same tool for every situation. But some bodies of water don't need ironing. They only need to be left alone. Ben stays seated. The glass table is no longer being wiped. And for the first time that evening, he notices this: not all quiet has to be created. Some quiet appears when we stop interfering. Ben stays still on the sofa longer than he expects. Not because he decides to meditate or do anything special. There's just no urge to get up right away. When you're used to constant intervention, doing nothing can feel strange at first, and then slowly it starts to feel normal. The air conditioner hums steadily in the background. A sound he hasn't noticed all day now becomes the only thing happening. It doesn't demand anything. It doesn't push. It's simply there. Ben realizes his shoulders have lowered at some point, not fully relaxed, just no longer braced. And that alone lets his breathing find a slower rhythm. A thought appears, the kind that usually makes him jump up and check his phone. But tonight it arrives, and then pauses. Not because Ben forces it to stop, just because there's no reaction following it. Like tossing a pebble into water, if no one keeps stirring, the circles widen on their own and fade. Ben looks toward the glass table. Its surface reflects the dim ceiling light. Not perfect. There are still tiny marks you'd only notice if you looked closely. But he doesn't get up to fix them. A very light feeling passes through him, almost surprise. Apparently he can leave something imperfect as it is, and nothing bad happens. He places both feet on the floor, noticing the faint coolness of the tile. For a moment he realizes he's been living in his head all day, and this is the first time he's really back in his body, not through thinking, but through simple sensations: feet on the ground, back against the sofa, air touching skin. If someone asked Ben what he was doing right now, he probably wouldn't know how to answer. not working, not resting in the usual way, just letting things run on their own. And in this, not doing, a very quiet kind of trust begins to form. Trust that the lake knows how to settle. Trust that not every moment needs a hand stepping in. Time passes without clear markers. Ben doesn't check the clock. He doesn't count minutes. He only notices that the urge to make things calm has softened. It hasn't disappeared, but it's light enough now that it no longer controls him. More like a gentle breeze than a firm push. He stands up unhurried and turns off the living room light. The apartment slips into a faint glow from the hallway. The space now feels like water after the wind has stopped. Not perfectly still, but calm enough to reflect. In the bedroom, Ben doesn't open his phone. He doesn't review tomorrow. He lies down and lets his body find the most comfortable position on its own. No adjusting the pillow again and again. No searching for the right posture. Just allowing his weight to be held by the bed. There's something Ben begins to understand, not through logic, but through direct experience. Peace doesn't come from forcing everything to be still. It comes from stopping the extra stirring. When reactions settle, the world doesn't need to be controlled as tightly as we think. If you're listening and you recognize this habit of ironing the lake in your own mind, that's okay. Tonight, you don't need to create silence. You only need to stop adding more disturbance. The water will find its shape again. If you fall asleep at some point, that's natural. There's no right or wrong moment, just the moment when your body finally feels safe enough to rest. And if you're still awake, there's nothing else you need to do. Just let this sound pass through like one last small ripple dissolving into the lake. Listen for a little while, and then let everything settle. Some mornings don't arrive with energy. They arrive quietly, almost shy, like they're not sure if anyone is ready for them yet. Tyler was already awake when the light started to thin the darkness between the trees. He hadn't set an alarm. He rarely did on days like this. As a park ranger, his schedule shifted with the seasons, with weather, with things that didn't care much about clocks. That morning he stood on a narrow trail just before sunrise, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, breath visible for a moment and then gone. The forest was still. Not silent exactly, but waiting. The kind of quiet that feels full rather than empty. Tyler took a few slow steps forward, boots pressing into damp soil. Somewhere above him, a bird began to sing. Just one. A thin, clear sound, unhurried, unafraid of being heard or not heard. It didn't repeat itself for effect. It didn't pause to see if anyone was listening. It simply sang the way it always did because that was what it did when the morning came. Tyler stopped walking. He hadn't meant to. His body just did it on its own. He stood there, head tilted slightly, listening. Another bird joined in, then another, each with its own rhythm, its own tone. None of them tried to match the others. None of them waited for permission. They weren't performing. They weren't proving anything. They weren't hoping for applause. They were just being birds. Tyler felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized was tight. It wasn't a dramatic release, no wave of emotion. Just a subtle shift, like when you unclench your jaw after holding it all night. Lately, he'd been carrying a quiet question around with him, one he didn't talk about much. It showed up when he scrolled through his phone at night, when he heard old friends talk about promotions or big moves or what's next. The question wasn't loud, but it was persistent. Am I doing enough, Mai? Enough on paper. His life was fine. Steady job, decent health, a small apartment close to the park. He liked his work, he believed in it. But sometimes, especially in moments of comparison, that didn't seem to count for much. The world was loud about success, about recognition, about being seen. And Tyler wasn't sure where someone like him fit into that noise. Another bird sang closer this time. Tyler smiled, almost without realizing it. Not because the sound was impressive, but because it was honest. The bird wasn't trying to be louder than the rest of the forest. It wasn't trying to stand out. It was simply responding to the morning. Tyler thought about how often he did the opposite. How often he checked to see if what he was doing mattered before he let himself enjoy it. How often he measured his days by reaction instead of by presence. How many times he'd waited for someone else to notice before he allowed himself to feel okay about where he was. The bird didn't wait. It sang again the same simple phrase, as if nothing else in the world required its attention. Tyler leaned against a nearby tree, the bark cool through his jacket. He closed his eyes for a moment. The forest continued without him. The light shifted. The air moved. Nothing stopped just because he did. There was something oddly comforting about that. He realized that the birds weren't singing for the forest. They were singing from themselves, from whatever instinct or joy or necessity lived inside them. They didn't seem concerned with how their song landed. They didn't adjust their pitch to be more likable. They didn't question whether they deserved to be heard. They sang because singing was part of being alive. Tyler took a slow breath in, then out. The breath felt easier than it had earlier, like it didn't have to pass through as many tight places to get out. He thought about the small things he loved that no one ever clapped for. Early mornings like this, fixing trail signs, watching fog lift off the ground, listening to the woods wake up. None of it earned praise. None of it went online. But it filled something real in him. Maybe value didn't have to be loud. Maybe it didn't have to be proven. Maybe it didn't even have to be witnessed. Another song rose from the trees, then faded naturally without a dramatic ending. No grand finale. Just a soft return to quiet. Tyler opened his eyes. The sky was lighter now. Not bright yet, but changing. He straightened up, brushed his hands together, and took a step forward on the trail. The birds continued behind him, unconcerned with whether he stayed or went. As he walked, the question that had been following him didn't disappear completely, but it felt less heavy, less demanding, like it didn't need an answer right now. He didn't need to sing louder. He didn't need to wait for approval. He just needed to keep moving through his own morning at his own pace, and somehow that felt like enough for now. Tyler kept walking as the light slowly spread between the trees. The trail curved gently ahead, familiar, but never boring. He'd walked it hundreds of times in different weather, different moods, different versions of himself. It always looked slightly new anyway. The birds were still singing, though, not all at once anymore. One would call out then, another leaving small pockets of quiet in between. The pauses felt just as important as the sound itself. Nothing rushed to fill them. Tyler noticed how his steps had fallen into an easy rhythm. Not forced, not measured, just moving. His shoulders dropped a little more with each breath, as if his body was remembering something it had forgotten during the week. He thought about how often he'd treated his own life like a performance, even when no one was watching. How he'd edited himself internally, adjusting tone and pace, wondering how things looked from the outside. It was exhausting, living as if there were always an audience somewhere beyond the trees. The birds didn't live that way. They didn't ask if the forest approved of their song. They didn't replay it later, wondering if they could have done it better. They didn't compare themselves to the bird 3 branches over. They sang. And when they were done, they stopped. Tyler slowed and sat on a fallen log near the edge of the trail. The wood was cool and slightly damp solid beneath him. He rested his elbows on his knees and let his gaze soften, not focused on anything in particular. The forest continued its quiet work around him. There was something healing about realizing that his worth didn't have to be constantly reaffirmed, that he didn't need to earn the right to exist comfortably in his own life. He could just be here, breathing, listening, taking up space without apology. He hadn't always believed that. Growing up, praise had come with conditions. Do well, be useful, make sense to other people. Over time, he'd learned to translate attention into value silence, into doubt. If no one was responding, maybe he wasn't doing enough. Maybe he needed to try harder. But the forest offered no feedback like that. It didn't reward or withhold. It simply allowed everything to exist in its own way. Tall trees, small birds, quiet mornings, all of it counted. Tyler felt a small smile touch his face again. Not because he'd figured something out, but because he didn't feel the need to figure anything out anymore. The pressure to define himself softened the way fog lifts without being pushed. A bird landed on a nearby branch close enough for Tyler to hear the flutter of wings. It stayed for a moment, then lifted off again. No drama, no attachment, just motion. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the sounds layer over one another, the birds, the wind, his own breathing. Each sound arrived, stayed, and moved on. None of them asked to be held. When he opened his eyes, the morning felt fully present now. Light had reached the forest floor. Colors had returned. Tyler stood brushing dirt from his hands and continued down the trail. As he walked, a thought surfaced, simple and unforced. Maybe I don't need to be seen to be real. It wasn't a declaration, just a quiet noticing. The birds kept singing behind him, not concerned with whether he remembered them later. They weren't building a case for their importance. They were living it moment by moment, without explanation. Tyler reached the point where the trail split. He paused, then chose the left path, the one that dipped slightly before rising again. He didn't analyze the choice. It just felt right. The forest held him as he moved forward. No spotlight, No applause, no judgment. Just the steady presence of something larger where every small voice had its place. By the time the trail opened up near the ranger station, the birds had quieted. The morning had moved on. Tyler felt ready to move with it. He didn't feel suddenly confident or transformed. He didn't feel certain about everything ahead. But he felt settled, like something inside him had found its natural pitch again. Not too loud, not too small, just true to itself. And that he realized was enough. Jason didn't tell anyone he was thinking about quitting. Not because he was ashamed exactly. More because he didn't have the energy for the conversations that would follow. The encouragement, the advice, the well-meaning questions that sounded like pressure. He could already hear the phrases people used when they wanted to help. Don't give up. You're almost there. Just push through. He was 23 at community college, trying to finish a program he'd picked because it sounded practical. Something stable. Something that would make his mom relax when she asked for the 5th time in a week how school was going. That night, he sat on the edge of his bed in a small apartment he shared with 2 roommates who were both out late. The place was quiet in a lived-in way. A faint hum from the refrigerator, the soft whoosh of the ceiling fan, the occasional pop of the heater turning on and off. His desk lamp was on, angled downward, so the rest of the room stayed dim. In front of him was a stack of papers, a course withdrawal form, a printout of his grades, and an email from the financial aid office he hadn't opened yet. The papers weren't dramatic, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that sat in your throat. Jason picked up the withdrawal form and read the lines again, even though he already knew what it said. Name, student ID, class, signature, date. It was strange how something that could change your life could look so ordinary on paper. He put it down and reached for his phone, then stopped. He wasn't looking for distraction. He was looking for relief. But the kind of relief he usually reached for, scrolling, checking, refreshing, didn't actually relieve anything. It just delayed the moment when he had to feel what he was feeling. Jason leaned back against the wall and let his head rest there. His eyes stayed open, unfocused on the dark corner of the room. He wasn't scared of failure in a loud way. He wasn't panicking. What he felt was quieter and heavier. The fear that he was stuck, that nothing in him was changing, that he'd keep trying and keep feeling like the same anxious, uncertain person who didn't know what he was doing. He'd been telling himself for months that he just needed to work harder, sleep less, focus more, be tougher. But lately, the harder he pushed, the worse he felt. Not just tired thin, like something in him was wearing down. His shoulders ached from sitting tense all day. His jaw felt tight. Even his hands resting on his knees had a slight tremble to them, like they didn't trust stillness. Jason stared at the papers again. The thought that kept returning wasn't, "I want to quit." It was, "I don't want to hurt like this anymore." And that difference mattered, even if he couldn't explain it yet. He got up and walked to the tiny kitchen. The floor was cold under his feet. He poured a glass of water and took a slow drink. The water tasted plain, almost sweet, in how uncomplicated it was. He stood there a moment, listening to the refrigerator hum. A steady sound, not asking anything from him. On the counter was a grocery store flyer one of his roommates had left behind. Most of it was ads. But on the back, there was a small picture of a butterfly, part of a spring gardening section. Jason didn't care about gardening. Still, his eyes paused there. A butterfly. Bright wings. Lightness. He thought randomly of how a caterpillar becomes one. Not the pretty part, the slow part. The part people didn't post, the part where it disappears into something tight and sealed and confusing. It wasn't a neat transformation. It was a messy one, a dissolving. Jason had seen a video once in a biology class he barely remembered of a caterpillar turning into a chrysalis. He'd expected it to look like a simple upgrade, like a costume change. Instead, it looked like an ending, like the caterpillar was giving up its shape, like it was surrendering to something it didn't understand. And then later, something new came out. Jason set the glass down and went back to his room. He didn't feel inspired. He didn't suddenly know what to do. But the image stayed with him, not the butterfly, but the chrysalis, the in-between place. Maybe that was where he was. Not failing, not succeeding, just changing. He sat down again, the withdrawal form still on the bed beside him. His fingers hovered over the paper. He didn't sign. He didn't tear it up either. He simply let it be there without forcing a decision out of himself. The ceiling fan moved the air in a slow circle, over and over, like time doing what time does. Jason exhaled longer than he meant to. The tightness in his chest softened a little, not because his problems were solved, but because he'd stopped squeezing himself for an answer. Sometimes the pain isn't punishment. Sometimes it's the skin getting too small. He didn't need to call it growth. He didn't need to call it transformation. He only needed to admit the truth of it. The old way he'd been living didn't fit anymore. And maybe the next thing wouldn't arrive through force. Maybe it would arrive through letting something end. He lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and let his eyes close for a moment. The room stayed quiet. The papers stayed where they were. The future stayed outside the door, waiting its turn. For now, Jason was allowed to be in the in-between. Jason woke sometime later, not fully asleep, not fully awake. The room was darker now. The desk lamp had clicked itself off, and the only light came from the thin strip under the door where the hallway glowed faintly. The ceiling fan still turned slow and patient, moving the same air it had been moving all night. For a few seconds, he didn't remember what time it was or what day it was. That small disorientation felt almost kind. There was no label yet, no role to step back into. His body felt heavy, but not in the exhausted way he'd grown used to. This heaviness was softer, like something settling rather than collapsing. His shoulders weren't pressed up around his ears anymore. His jaw wasn't clenched. Jason lay there and noticed his breathing. It came and went on its own without instruction. When he stopped trying to manage it, it slowed. When it slowed, his thoughts thinned out. The papers were still on the bed beside him. He could see their edges in the low light. They didn't look threatening now, they just looked unfinished. He rolled onto his side and pulled the blanket up around his shoulders. The fabric was warm, familiar. He hadn't changed clothes, but it didn't matter. Comfort didn't require preparation tonight. The image of the chrysalis returned quietly, not as an idea, not as a metaphor he needed to analyze, but as a feeling, tight, enclosed, still. Inside a chrysalis, he remembered the caterpillar doesn't simply wait. Its old body breaks down. The structures that once made sense dissolve. What emerges later isn't a repaired version of the same thing. It's something different. That part had always unsettled him. Jason had been trying to carry his old shape forward. The same expectations, the same measures of success, the same timeline everyone seemed to agree on. No wonder it hurt. No wonder he felt like he was failing at a version of life that no longer fit. Fear had told him that stopping meant falling behind, that letting something end meant losing everything. But lying there in the quiet, he could feel another truth beneath that fear. Not all endings were losses. Some were releases. He didn't need to decide tonight whether he would stay in the program or leave it. He didn't need to map out a new identity. He didn't need to become the butterfly before the night was over. The work of this moment was smaller. It was staying still long enough for the struggle to stop thrashing. Jason rested one hand on his chest and felt the warmth there. A steady presence. Proof that something in him was still working, still alive, still responding to care. Outside, a car passed somewhere on the street, tires hissing softly against the pavement. The sound came and went without leaving a trace. The world kept moving without requiring his participation. That was a relief. He let his thoughts drift without grabbing onto them. School, work, his mom's worried face. None of them needed his attention right now. They could wait outside the cocoon of this night. Change didn't feel like excitement. It felt like quiet, like not having to explain himself to anyone, even to himself. Jason's breathing grew slower. His body sank deeper into the mattress. The boundary between thought and rest softened like the edges of a picture losing focus. The caterpillar didn't rush its becoming. It didn't argue with the process. It didn't demand proof that something better was coming. It simply allowed the old form to end. Jason felt his eyelids grow heavy again. This time he didn't resist it. He didn't try to stay alert. He didn't tell himself to sleep. He just let go of the need to be anything other than what he was in this moment. Not finished, not broken, just changing. The night held him without questions. The room stayed dark and steady. Somewhere inside the quiet, something new was already forming, unseen, unhurried, exactly on time. Sophia stayed longer than she needed to. The classroom was empty, the hallway lights outside already dimmed to their evening setting. Most of the building had that after-hours quiet. No footsteps, no kids' voices, just the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional click from somewhere down the hall as the building settled. She stood by her desk with her tote bag still on her shoulder, staring at the whiteboard like it might tell her what to do with the feeling that had been following her all day. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even loud anger. it was disappointment. The kind that sits behind your ribs and makes everything feel heavier than it should. Sophia was 30, an elementary school teacher, and she had learned how to keep her face calm even when her heart felt bruised. A classroom demanded steadiness. Kids could sense it the way animals sense weather. If she carried too much tension, they carried it too. So she smiled when she had to. She kept her voice warm. She did the lesson. She cleaned the glue sticks off the tables. She reminded a kid for the 4th time to stop chewing on the eraser. She managed. But in the quiet, when the room finally belonged to no one, the feeling returned with more clarity. It started with a message. Just one line on her phone earlier that morning. A parent email, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. The kind of message that reads like concern, but feels like accusation. It wasn't the first time. But today it landed differently. Sophia had stared at her screen in the teacher's lounge, coffee in hand, and felt something heat up in her chest. Not because the parent was entirely wrong, not because she was guilty, but because she was tired of being doubted by people who didn't see the whole day. She typed a response 3 times, deleted it 3 times. Finally, she wrote something short and professional and careful, the kind of email that takes all the emotion out of your body and turns it into safe sentences. Then she went on with her day, like nothing happened. Now, standing in the empty classroom, she could feel the leftover heat in her throat. The words she didn't say. The urge to defend herself. The urge to be seen. She walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The sky was a pale gray blue, clouded over in a way that didn't look like rain, but didn't look like clear weather either. The sun wasn't visible. Still, the light was there, spread out, muted, filling everything without a direct source. Sophia remembered something her grandmother used to say when she was a kid. The sun is always there. Clouds just cover it for a while. Back then, Sophia thought it was just about weather. Now she understood it as something else too. When she was angry at someone, the anger became the only thing she could see. It colored the entire person. It turned one moment into a full identity. One email into a whole story. They don't respect me. They think I'm careless. They're looking for a reason to blame me. And maybe there was some truth in that. Or maybe it was just the cloud doing what clouds do, blocking the sun, making the world feel darker than it actually was. Sophia turned back toward her desk. Her hands moved without thinking. She straightened a stack of worksheets, aligned the corners, put a marker back in its tray. Small actions, tidy actions. Actions that made sense when the mind didn't. She tried to be honest with herself softly. She wasn't only angry at the parent, she was angry at the whole system that made teachers feel like they were always on trial. The endless pressure to prove you're doing enough. The way a single complaint could make you question months of effort. And under that anger was something even quieter fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being good enough, fear that one day someone would be right. Sophia sat down in her chair and let her tote bag slide to the floor. The strap made a small thump against the desk leg. She exhaled long and slow, like her body had been waiting for permission to do that all day. She thought about the parent again, about the kid actually. The kid who had smiled at her during reading time. The kid who brought her a dandelion from the playground and said it was for luck. The kid who sometimes came to school a little too hungry, a little too quiet. Sophia didn't know what was happening at home. She didn't know what kind of day the parent had. She only knew what the email had sounded like. And the email had made a cloud that was now sitting in her chest. She didn't need to excuse it. She didn't need to pretend it was fine. She just needed to remember something important. A cloud is not the sky. A cloud is not the sun. A cloud is a passing thing. Sophia reached for the light switch near the door and clicked off one row of fluorescent lights. The room dimmed slightly. She clicked off another. The hum softened. The classroom became gentler, less sharp around the edges. In the lower light, the whiteboard looked less demanding. The desks looked more like quiet furniture than stations of responsibility. The whole room felt like it was exhaling with her. Sophia stood by the door for a moment, hand on the switch, and let the last bit of heat in her body settle. The email would still be there tomorrow. The story would still be there if she wanted to pick it up again. But tonight she didn't want to carry it home. Not the cloud. Not the storm she could make out of it. She turned off the final lights, locked the classroom, and stepped into the hallway where the building felt cool and calm. The sun, she reminded herself as she walked, hadn't gone anywhere. It was just behind something for a while. Sophia didn't check her phone on the drive home. It sat face down in the cup holder, silent, dark. She noticed the urge to reach for it anyway, just to see if anything else had come in. Just to confirm the story hadn't changed. She let the urge pass. The road ahead was familiar streetlights, spaced evenly, each one appearing and disappearing at a steady pace. Her shoulders dropped a little as she drove. At home, she left her shoes by the door and didn't turn on the overhead lights. A small lamp in the living room was enough. The apartment felt still in that end-of-day way, like it had been waiting patiently for her to arrive and stop moving. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window while she drank. Outside, the sky had darkened completely now. The clouds were still there, she could tell, but they'd blended into the night. Nothing dramatic. Just layers of gray moving slowly, doing what they do. Anger has a habit of overstating its case. It takes a moment and stretches it into a verdict. It takes one interaction and uses it to explain an entire person. Sophia could feel how easily she'd slipped into that earlier, how the email had begun to stand in for the parent, for the relationship, for the whole year. But now, with the day at a distance, the feeling had changed shape. It wasn't gone. It just wasn't loud. She sat on the couch and let herself sink into the cushion. Her body felt tired in a clean way, the kind that comes after holding a lot and finally setting some of it down. She rested her hands on her lap and noticed how warm they were, how steady. The image returned to her, not the email, not the words, but the sky from earlier. The way the light had still filled everything, even without a visible sun. She thought about the parent again, but differently this time. Not as an antagonist, not as a character in a story, just as a person likely tired in their own way, worried in the way parents often are, when they don't know how else to be. This didn't make the email okay. It didn't erase the sting, but it softened the edges. Forgiveness, Sophia realized, didn't have to be a feeling she summoned. It didn't have to be warm or generous or complete. It could be as simple as refusing to let one cloud decide the weather forever. She wasn't forgiving the behavior. She was forgiving the moment, its power. Later, as she got ready for bed, Sophia caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked calmer than it had that morning. Not happier, just less tight. She brushed her teeth slowly, unhurried, watching the familiar movements. When she lay down, the apartment made its quiet nighttime sounds, the faint hum of the fridge, the soft creak of the building settling. She pulled the blanket up and exhaled long and even. The email drifted through her mind once more, lighter now, like a thought passing through open air. She didn't follow it. She didn't push it away. She let it move on its own. Somewhere between one breath and the next, she understood something simple and steady. People are not their worst moments, and neither are we. Anger can make it feel otherwise. It can convince you that what you're seeing is the whole truth. But anger, like weather, changes. It moves. It thins. The sun doesn't need defending. It doesn't need arguing. It just waits. Sophia's breathing slowed as the room grew darker. The day loosened its hold. Tomorrow would come with its own clouds, its own light. She didn't need to solve any of that now. For tonight, it was enough to rest in the knowing that clarity returns on its own when we stop staring at the sky and demanding it be different. Some things pass best when they're allowed to. There are days when Ava doesn't realize she's been holding her breath until her body starts to feel tired. Not holding her breath in the literal way, like underwater, but the everyday kind of holding belly, slightly tight chest, a little constricted shoulders, subtly lifted as if relaxing would cause everything to slip out of her hands. It's a small, quiet reflex, but when it lasts long enough, it turns into a kind of exhaustion that's hard to name. Ava is 29, a flight attendant. She's used to holding herself just right for hours at a time, a smile that's warm, but not too much, a voice that's calm, steps that are light and steady. On the plane, everything follows a procedure. And in her mind, everything does too. It just never shuts off. After each flight, when she gets back to her hotel room, she expects to feel lighter. But many nights, it feels like she's still standing in the cabin, still scanning, still on, even when no one is calling her name. That night, Ava checks in late. The hotel door closes behind her, and the room greets her with a familiar sound, the steady hum of the air conditioner, a thin layer of white noise covering everything. The bedside lamp is dim. The carpet softens her steps. Nothing is wrong. Everything looks like dozens of other rooms she's stayed in. And yet when she sets her suitcase down, her shoulders refuse to drop. She opens the suitcase, takes out her sleepwear, hangs her uniform in the closet. Each movement is neat and efficient, practiced into habit. But when everything is put away, when the suitcase is closed, when the key card is placed on the table, Ava notices something simple. She still hasn't let out a full breath. she sits on the edge of the bed. The mattress dips slightly softer than she expected. She rests her hands on her thighs and looks down at her fingers. Her nails are painted a light color, chipped a little on her thumb. A small, unimportant detail, but enough to bring her back into the moment, like a gentle tap on the shoulder. Ava inhales. The breath comes in quickly as usual. But when she exhales, it stops halfway, as if there's a door inside her that only opens part way. She isn't doing it on purpose. Her body is just holding the breath, holding the posture, holding something she can't quite name. She closes her eyes briefly, then opens them again. Not to meditate, just to check where she actually is. In a hotel room, alone. No announcements, no passengers, no emergencies. Just the steady sound of the AC, like a quiet stream running in the background. And still in her mind, tomorrow has already started. The alarm time, the early flight, the shuttle schedule, messages she hasn't replied to. Something someone said on the last flight that she keeps replaying, wondering if she should have responded differently. None of it is a disaster. It's just a lot. And when it's a lot, her body automatically chooses a familiar response. Hold tight. There's a moment when Ava notices the simplest thing of all. She's trying to take in more air without fully breathing out. Like pouring water into a glass that's already full. The water can't go in. It just spills over, creating a mess. And in the body that spill isn't water. It's tension. She places one hand on her chest, the other on her belly, the way she was once taught in a breathing class years ago. Not to do it right, just to feel. The AC keeps humming. The light stays warm. The room remains safe. Then she tries to breathe out a little longer, as if exhaling through a narrow straw. Slow, thin. Not forced, just extended. That exhale doesn't change her life. It doesn't erase tomorrow's schedule. It doesn't silence her thoughts right away. But it creates something small, a bit of space. And in that space, Ava realizes she doesn't have to hold everything with her body. She can let the breath do its job. And when the breath is allowed to fully leave, there's naturally room for the next one to come in. She exhales again. This time her shoulders drop a little. Her jaw unclenches. Her belly softens. As if her body has finally received the message. Tonight you don't need to stand guard. If you're listening and you recognize this quiet way of holding in the chest, in the shoulders, in the mind, that's okay. You don't need to fix it right now. Just notice it. Maybe try one longer exhale than usual, like setting down something you've been carrying all day. Ava remains seated on the edge of the bed, eyes resting on the warm light. And for the first time that evening, she feels like she can stay in her body, instead of running endlessly in her head. Ava stays there a little longer. Not because she's trying to do anything the right way, but because there's no reason to hurry. When the exhale is allowed to travel its full length, her body seems to slow down with it. Not the heavy kind of slow, but the safe kind. Like when a plane has finished descending and no longer needs to hold speed. She leans back against the headboard. The pillow supports her shoulders, soft and warm. The air conditioner continues its steady hum, unchanged, asking nothing of her attention. Ava rests a hand on her belly, just to feel the subtle movement of breathing. No counting, no timing. Just noticing breath in, breath out. Enough. A thought passes by, a faint image of tomorrow. But it doesn't pull a whole chain of thoughts in with it like usual. It arrives, pauses at the doorway, as if unsure whether to enter. And when Ava doesn't open the door, it leaves on its own. No drama, no struggle. She lies down. The mattress receives her as if it's been waiting. Ava pulls the blanket up to her chest. The fabric feels cool and light. She doesn't adjust the pillow again and again. She doesn't search for the perfect position. She just lets her weight be held. There's a feeling here that's different from giving up. It's the feeling of being supported without needing to do anything else. Her breathing is longer now, not because she's stretching it, but because nothing is holding it back. As she exhales, it feels like opening a small door inside herself, letting out what's built up all day, unsaid words, held smiles, unnecessary alerts. They don't disappear instantly, but they grow lighter, like luggage being set down on the floor. Ava realizes something very simple all day long. She's taken so much in sounds, requests, other people's emotions. But she rarely lets enough out. And a body that doesn't get to exhale fully will hold on to everything, even what it doesn't need. Tonight, just allowing a little release is enough to create space. The warm light spills across the ceiling. The shadows are soft without sharp edges. Ava doesn't stare at them. She lets her eyes stay half closed, just enough for the light to blur. The sound of the AC becomes more distant, like a stream farther away. In that space, she feels her heartbeat slow, not from exhaustion, but from safety. If an inhale comes and feels crowded, Ava lets it come only as far as it can. She doesn't force more in, no pushing. Then she exhales just a little longer, like the tide coming in, going out. The shore doesn't have to do anything. For a brief moment, a thought appears, I'm okay. And then she lets it drift away without holding on to it. No need to confirm it. No need to label it. A feeling of okayness doesn't need to be gripped to stay. If you're listening and you notice your chest feeling lighter, your belly softer, you can let that be. There's nothing else you need to do. And if you don't notice anything at all, that's fine too. Your breath is still doing its work, even when you're not paying attention. Ava lets one exhale finish completely. Then another. The space between breaths grows longer. Not because she's controlling it, but because her body has found its own rhythm again. In that space, there are no demands, no schedules. Just rest. She turns gently onto her side. The blanket makes a soft sound. Everything remains quiet. Nothing is being missed. Nothing needs to be made up for. Tonight doesn't ask her to be ready. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this story, that's completely okay. You don't need to wait for a sign. Sleep isn't a reward. It's simply what happens when the body is finally allowed to exhale enough. And if you're still awake, there's no need to try to get to sleep. Just keep letting the breath move out softly, unhurried, and allow the next breath to find its way in when it's ready. Tonight, there's nothing more you need to hold. Just breathe out and let everything else arrive on its own. The mirror didn't flatter her. It never did. Not under that bathroom light, not this late, not after a day that had already taken too much out of her. Madison leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the edge of the sink, and stared at her own face like it belonged to someone she was still trying to understand. The apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes even small sounds feel loud. The faucet dripped once after she turned it off. Somewhere in the building, a distant door closed. The fan above her hummed softly, pulling warm air upward. Madison had spent most of the day looking at versions of herself. The version she posted. The version she replied with. The version she performed in short clips and captions, smiling at the right moments, sounding confident at the right times. She was good at it. She'd learned how to be on without it looking like effort. But now, alone in the bathroom, she felt like a phone with too many tabs open, bright heated, still running even after the work was over. She reached for a makeup wipe, dragged it across her cheek, and watched the cotton come away, slightly tinted. She did it again, slower this time. There was something calming about the motion. Simple, quiet, no audience. In the mirror, her eyes looked tired. Not just sleepy tired in the way someone gets when they've been holding themselves together all day. She tried to smile just to see. It looked strange, like a gesture borrowed from another room. She let it drop. Madison wasn't having a crisis. Nothing dramatic had happened. No breakup, no scandal, no big failure. It was smaller than that, and somehow harder to name. It was the feeling that her worth lived outside of her. In reactions, in numbers, in who noticed, in whether she was wanted, admired, approved of. And when the noise stopped, she wasn't always sure what was left. She turned the faucet on again, letting water run over her hands. The sound filled the bathroom with a steady hush. She splashed her face, then patted it dry with a towel that smelled faintly like laundry soap. Her phone buzzed from the counter. A notification. She didn't pick it up. Just let it sit there, lighting up the edge of the sink and then going dark again. For a moment, she watched herself breathe. It was such an ordinary thing to notice, but it made her feel strangely human. Not a brand, not a profile, just a person with lungs and skin and a nervous system that didn't care how many likes she got that day. Madison leaned closer to the mirror, studying a small line near her mouth she hadn't noticed a year ago. It wasn't deep, it wasn't alarming, but it made her think about time and how quietly it moves through you. A memory drifted in something her grandmother used to say when Madison was little, when she'd run to her crying over a scraped knee or a bad day at school. "Smile at yourself first," her grandmother would say, gentle but certain. "Don't wait for the world to decide if you're worth being kind to." Madison had rolled her eyes back then. It sounded like something from a greeting card. But standing here now, it didn't feel cheesy. It felt practical. Like advice for surviving in a world that trains you to outsource your self-worth. She set the towel down and stared at her reflection again this time. without scanning for flaws. She tried to look at herself the way she might look at a friend who'd had a long day. The way you look at someone you don't need to critique, someone you just want to understand. Her shoulders dropped slightly. It wasn't magical. It didn't fix anything. But it shifted something like moving a lamp so the harsh shadow softens. Madison placed one hand on the edge of the sink, grounding herself, and let the other rest on her own collarbone for just a second. The warmth of her skin under her palm felt real, immediate. Not a thought, not a story, just contact. She breathed in, then out. Not as a technique, just as a permission. The phone buzzed again faintly. She ignored it again. The world could wait 2 minutes. The world could wait 10. She looked at her own eyes in the mirror. Not the whole face, not the whole image, just the eyes. They were still her eyes. Even after everything. Even after the long day, the constant output, the constant comparison. Something in them was still steady. She didn't smile yet, not fully, but she softened her mouth just a little, like she was letting go of a habit she didn't need to keep holding. And in that small softening, she noticed a quiet truth. It wasn't that she needed more validation. It was that she needed to stop treating herself like someone who had to earn kindness. Madison turned off the bathroom light and left the door slightly open as she walked toward her bedroom. The hallway was dim, calm, the kind of dim that tells your brain it's safe to slow down. Behind her, the mirror stayed where it was reflecting an empty bathroom. It wasn't waiting to judge her. It wasn't asking for anything. It was just there. And for the first time all day, that felt like a relief. Madison lay back on her bed without turning on the lamp. The room was lit only by the soft glow from the streetlight outside filtered through the curtains. It wasn't dark enough to disappear into, but it was dark enough to stop inspecting everything. She rested one hand on her stomach, feeling it rise and fall. The other hand lay open beside her palm, up, fingers loose. Her body seemed to understand before her thoughts did that nothing more was required of her tonight. The day replayed itself in fragments. A comment she'd reread too many times. A moment where she'd wondered if she should have said something differently. A brief spike of relief when a post did well, followed by the quiet drop afterward. None of it arrived with the same sharpness it had earlier. It came through a layer of distance now, as if softened by the dim light. She thought again of the mirror. Not the image exactly, but the feeling of standing there without trying to fix anything. Without adjusting angles. Without searching for reassurance or bracing for disappointment. Just meeting herself as she was. That felt new. Madison realized how rarely she did that. How often she approached herself like a problem to solve a version, to improve a thing, to optimize. Even rest had become something she tried to do well, something to succeed at. But lying here with the room quiet and her phone face down on the nightstand, she felt no pull to perform. No need to curate. No one to convince. The thought came gently without insistence. I'm already here. She remembered how easy it had been earlier to place her hand on her own chest. How grounding it felt to feel warmth instead of judgment. It hadn't been dramatic. It hadn't changed her life, but it had changed the tone of the moment. Sometimes healing wasn't about breakthroughs. Sometimes it was about not adding another layer of pressure. Madison rolled slightly onto her side, tucking her knees in just enough to be comfortable. The sheets were cool. The pillow held the familiar shape of her head. Her breathing slowed, not because she told it to, but because there was space for it to do so. She thought about how long she'd been waiting for permission to feel okay. Waiting for the right response, the right reaction, the right signal from outside herself. As if peace were something that had to be handed to her by someone else. But nothing had stopped her from offering it to herself. The mirror hadn't demanded anything. It hadn't praised or criticized. It had simply reflected what was there. And what was there beneath the layers of effort and expectation was someone who was tired but still whole. Someone who didn't need to earn rest. Someone who didn't need to be impressive in order to be worthy of care. Madison felt her jaw unclench slightly. Her shoulders sank into the mattress. A small exhale left her longer than the ones before. There was no urgency to fall asleep, no goal to reach. If sleep came, it would come. If it didn't, this quiet was still enough. She imagined the mirror again now, empty, the bathroom light off. Nothing staring back. Nothing asking her to be different. Just a room at rest. Her thoughts began to drift, not in a scattered way, but in the slow, wandering way that comes before sleep. Images blurred together. The sharp edges of the day softened. Madison didn't think about tomorrow. She didn't plan. She didn't rehearse. She stayed with what was simple and present: breath, warmth, stillness. If she smiled now, it wasn't for the mirror. It wasn't for anyone at all. It was the kind of smile that happens when you stop resisting yourself. Small, private, almost imperceptible. She let it fade naturally. In the quiet, there was nothing to fix, nothing to prove, nothing missing. Just a person resting inside her own life. And that was enough for the night. The yard didn't look the same after the storm. Derek noticed it the moment he stepped outside, coffee mug still warm in his hand. The grass was darker, pressed flat in places. Leaves were scattered where they didn't belong. And near the old tree by the fence, one of the larger branches lay broken on the ground, angled awkwardly as if it had tried to land gently and failed. He stood there longer than he needed to. Derek was 52, a mechanic who'd spent most of his life fixing things that broke in obvious ways. Engines made sense to him. If something failed, there was usually a cause you could point to, a part you could replace. Loss, on the other hand, didn't follow diagrams. The tree had been there longer than the house. Thick trunk, deep roots. It had survived storms before. That was why the broken branch unsettled him more than he expected. Not because the damage was severe, but because it proved that even sturdy things gave way sometimes. He took a sip of coffee and set the mug down on the porch rail. The air smelled clean, almost sharp, the way it always did after heavy rain. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's garage door opened and closed. Ordinary morning sounds. Life continuing without commentary. Derek walked closer to the tree. The branch was heavier than it looked, bark rough against his palm when he reached down to test it. He didn't lift it yet. He just felt the weight. The storm had come through fast the night before. Wind howling, rain slamming sideways against the windows. He'd woken once, heart beating a little faster than usual, then fallen back asleep before he could name the fear. In the morning, the house was fine. The power was on. Nothing dramatic. Just this. A broken branch didn't feel like a disaster. It felt like a message he hadn't asked for. Derek straightened and looked up at the tree. The break was clean in places, jagged in others. Pale wood showed through where the branch had snapped raw and exposed. Above it, the rest of the tree stood, unchanged leaves, still clinging, branches still reaching. He'd lost people the same way. Not all at once, not the whole structure, just a part that had mattered more than he'd admitted. He hadn't talked much about it. That wasn't his style. You learned early in his line of work and in his family to keep moving. To deal with what was in front of you, to fix what you could and accept what you couldn't without spending too much time naming it. Still, some mornings the weight returned without warning. Like now. Derek bent down again and wrapped both hands around the branch. This time he lifted. It took effort. The muscles in his arms tightened. The branch shifted, then came free from the ground with a dull scrape. It felt strange carrying something that used to be alive. He dragged it a few feet away from the tree and set it down. The ground beneath was lighter, where it had been pressed, a faint outline marking its absence. For a moment he considered cutting it up right away, clearing the yard, restoring order. That was usually his instinct. Instead, he paused. The tree above him rustled slightly in a breeze that barely qualified as wind. The sound wasn't sad. It wasn't triumphant. It was just there. Derek noticed small buds along the remaining branches, tight and green. He hadn't seen them before. They'd been there the whole time, waiting for the season to do what seasons did. Something loosened in his chest. Loss had taught him to expect emptiness, to brace for the space where something used to be. But the tree wasn't empty. It was adjusting, redistributing weight, making room without asking permission. He picked up the branch again and carried it toward the side of the yard, where he kept a pile for yard waste. Each step felt deliberate, not heavy with meaning, just steady. As he set the branch down, he rested his hand on the rough bark one last time. The surface was cool, damp from the rain, solid. Breaking, he realized, wasn't the opposite of growth. Sometimes it was part of it, a redirection, a necessary release of what could no longer be held. Derek straightened and looked back at the tree. It stood quietly, incomplete but alive, rooted despite the damage. The yard would look different now. Not worse, just changed. He picked up his coffee mug and took another sip. It had cooled, but he didn't mind. Some things didn't need to be perfect to be enough. The morning continued, and so did he. Later that afternoon, the light shifted in a way Derek recognized, but couldn't have named if asked. The sun dipped just enough to soften the edges of everything it touched. The yard looked quieter now, less like a place that needed fixing and more like a place that could be left alone for a while. He returned outside with a pair of work gloves and a small saw, then stopped halfway down the steps. The broken branch rested where he'd left it, angled against the fence, no longer surprising. The tree stood above it, steady, casting a familiar patch of shade. Derek took off the gloves and set them on the railing. There was no rush. He leaned against the porch post and listened. A bird called from somewhere he couldn't see. Another answered. The sounds didn't fill the space. They gave it shape. He noticed how the yard held both what had fallen and what remained, without tension, without judgment. Grief, he'd learned, didn't move in straight lines. It circled back. It showed up in ordinary moments, in the quiet after a storm, in the sight of something changed but still standing. Derek breathed out slowly and felt the weight in his chest ease, not disappear, just settle into a more manageable place. He didn't need to make sense of it. He didn't need to turn it into a lesson. He only needed to let it be present without pushing it away. He walked closer to the tree and looked again at the break. The exposed wood had begun to darken slightly as it dried. The tree was already doing what trees did, closing, protecting, adapting. No instruction required. On one of the remaining branches, a small cluster of leaves caught the light. They were newer than the others, a little brighter. Derek hadn't noticed them earlier, not because they weren't there, but because his attention had been elsewhere. Loss had a way of narrowing the field of view. He touched the trunk lightly, feeling the texture beneath his palm. The tree didn't respond, but it didn't need to. It was alive in its own quiet way, continuing without explanation. Derek stepped back and sat on the porch step, elbows resting on his knees. From here, the yard looked balanced again, not the same, but not broken either. The space left by the fallen branch didn't pull his eye the way it had that morning. It was simply part of the scene now. He thought about how often he'd tried to fill empty spaces too quickly. How uncomfortable he was with gaps, silence, pauses, endings, without immediate replacements. He'd learned to patch and repair and move on because that was what kept things running. But some spaces didn't need to be filled. Some needed to be left open long enough for something new to find its way in. The breeze picked up slightly, just enough to stir the leaves. The tree shifted, redistributing its weight with a subtle creak. Derek felt something similar happen inside him, a quiet adjustment, a rebalancing that didn't require effort. He stood up and walked over to the broken branch once more. This time, he didn't lift it. He just looked at it as it was no longer part of the tree, not yet returned to the earth. In between, there was dignity in that, he thought. In acknowledging what had been, without needing to carry it forward unchanged. Derek left the branch where it was and went back inside. The house felt calm, grounded. He washed his mug, dried it, set it upside down on the counter. Small actions, familiar rhythms, the kind that didn't ask him to be anyone other than who he was right now. As evening approached, the light faded again and the yard settled into shadow. From the window, Derek could still see the outline of the tree solid against the dimming sky. The broken branch was less visible now, its shape blending into the dark. He felt no urgency to resolve anything before nightfall. The tree would grow again. The yard would change with the seasons. and he would continue shaped by what had been lost, but not defined by it. Sometimes the strongest things weren't the ones that never broke. They were the ones that learned how to keep growing after they did. Derek turned off the lights and let the house rest. Outside, the tree stood quietly, making room branch by branch for whatever came next. Noah didn't notice how tense he was until his hands started to ache. Not pain exactly, more like a deep stiffness under the skin, as if his fingers had been holding something too tightly for too long. He stood in the station's quiet room after shift, the kind of room meant for a few minutes of downtime, with a worn couch, a small lamp, and a humming vending machine in the hallway outside. Most of the guys were in the kitchen joking loudly the way people do when they're trying to shake off a hard day without naming it. Noah could hear them through the door laughter, a chair scraping, someone slapping the counter. He stayed in here. He was 33, a firefighter, and his body knew how to be ready. Ready meant alert, tight, focused. The kind of readiness that feels like a drawn bowstring. Pulled back muscles engaged everything, waiting for the moment it needs to release. The problem was, nobody tells you how to stop being ready. He sat on the edge of the couch and looked down at his hands. They were clean now, washed well, but the smell of smoke still lingered faintly in the fabric of his uniform. He flexed his fingers once, then again. The stiffness didn't leave. Noah reached for his gloves and loosened the strap. The Velcro made that familiar ripping sound, soft but decisive. He took one glove off, then the other, and set them on the table as if he was putting down something heavier than it looked. A small quiet hit him in the chest. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He exhaled long and slow, and felt the air move out like a release he didn't know he needed. Anger had been riding him all day, not like a wave, but like tension. Not at any one person, not in a clean direction. More like a pressure that couldn't find a place to land. A call earlier had gone sideways. A house fire that looked contained until it wasn't. A man outside screaming at them to hurry up while they were already moving as fast as human bodies could. A woman crying so hard she couldn't form words. A kid with soot on his face staring past everyone like he was somewhere else. Noah had done his job. That part was clear. What wasn't clear was what to do with what stayed in him after. Because the anger wasn't really about the man yelling, or the traffic that slowed the truck, or the supervisor who barked orders too sharply. It was about the helplessness hiding behind it. The truth nobody wanted to say out loud. Sometimes you do everything right and it still feels like not enough. Noah leaned back into the couch and let his head rest against the cushion. The lamp beside him threw a warm circle of light across the room. The rest stayed dim. He liked that. It didn't demand anything from his eyes. He thought about calling his wife, just to hear her voice. But he knew if he called now while the bowstring was still pulled tight inside him, he might snap over something small. He might bring the heat home. He didn't want to do that. Noah turned his wedding ring slowly on his finger, a habit he didn't notice until he was already doing it. The metal felt cool, grounding, real. He remembered something an older firefighter once told him years ago on his first month at the station. "You can't keep a bow drawn all night," the guy had said, half joking, half serious. "You'll ruin the string and you'll ruin your hands." At the time, Noah thought it was just about physical fatigue. Tonight he understood the other meaning. A nervous system held in readiness too long starts to misfire. It starts to see threats where there aren't any. It starts to respond to harmless questions like they're alarms. It starts to treat the people you love like they're the ones who pulled the string. Noah didn't want to become that. He sat up, placed both feet flat on the floor, and let his hands rest on his thighs. He wasn't trying to meditate. He wasn't trying to be spiritual. He was just trying to loosen the string by 1 inch. He inhaled, feeling the breath fill his chest. He exhaled and imagined, quietly, without forcing it, his shoulders dropping, not collapsing, just releasing the extra effort. Outside the room, the station noise continued. Someone laughed again. The vending machine hummed. A far-off siren passed, then faded. Noah stayed where he was. He didn't chase relief. He didn't chase forgiveness for anyone. He didn't even label his anger as right or wrong. He simply noticed what it did to his body when he held it tightened, jaw-tense hands, shallow breath. And he noticed what happened when he loosened the grip, air returned. The chest softened. The ache in his hands eased just slightly. A small difference, but real. He picked up one glove again and turned it over in his hands. The glove was scuffed, darkened from use. It had protected him. It had done its job. It didn't need to stay on him forever. Noah set it down. He leaned back again, eyes half closed, and let the room exist without him managing it, without him staying on guard. In the dim light, his anger started to look less like fire and more like tension that wanted to unwind. Like a bow that had been drawn for too long and was finally being allowed to rest. Noah stayed in the quiet room longer than he meant to. Not because he was avoiding anyone, but because his body hadn't finished letting go yet. When he finally stood up, the stiffness in his hands had softened. Not gone, just less sharp. Enough that he could move without feeling like he might snap. He gathered his things and headed out to the truck. The night air outside the station was cool and smelled faintly of damp pavement. He took a deeper breath than he had all day, the kind that drops into your chest without being forced. The drive home was uneventful. Red lights, green lights, familiar turns. His mind reached for the earlier call a few times, the shouting, the smoke, the kid's face. But each time the images faded more quickly. They didn't stick the way they usually did. At home, Noah slipped his boots off by the door and set his gear down where it belonged. The house was quiet. His wife had already gone to bed, a lamp still on in the bedroom, casting a warm glow into the hallway. He paused there, keys in hand. This was usually the moment when the tension followed him inside. When a small noise, a cabinet closing, a question asked too quickly, could set the bowstring vibrating again. He'd learned to recognize that moment by the way his chest tightened in advance, like his body was bracing for impact. Tonight he noticed the bracing and stopped. He set his keys down gently. The sound they made was soft, unthreatening. He stepped out of his uniform and changed into something loose, something that didn't ask his body to stay ready. In the bathroom, He washed his hands and felt the warmth of the water ease the last of the tightness from his fingers. He watched the soot-colored water swirl away and disappear. The image stayed with him longer than he expected. Some things don't need to be carried forward. In bed, Noah lay on his back and stared at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly above him. His wife shifted in her sleep, murmured something unintelligible, then settled again. The sound grounded him. This was home. Not a fire, not a call, not an emergency. The anger surfaced once more, softer now, like an echo. Not at anyone in particular, just the leftover energy of a system that had been pulled to its limit. Noah didn't push it away. He imagined the bow again, the string drawn tight all day, doing exactly what it was meant to do. He imagined his hands loosening their hold just enough, not dropping the bow, not breaking it, just giving it space to rest. His breathing slowed without effort. In, out, steady and even. Forgiveness, he realized, didn't have to be a conversation or a declaration. It could be a physical choice. The choice to stop treating your own body like it's still in danger when the danger has passed. As the minutes went by, the day's sharp edges dulled. The tension that had nowhere to go finally found a place to land. Sleep came quietly, not as an escape, as a return. The bow, no longer drawn, rested beside him. The string loosened, held its shape without strain. And Noah, no longer holding himself at the limit, was allowed to let the night take over. Some evenings, Lily isn't sure whether she's tired from the drive itself or from staring too long through a fogged-up pane of glass. Not foggy enough to block everything, just foggy enough to make what's ahead feel unclear, uncertain, forcing her to squint a little more, tense a little more, as if trying harder will make the road appear. Lily is 47, an HR manager. That night, she's sitting in her car, parked in front of her house. The engine is off. The headlights are still on. A thin layer of fog coats the windshield. Streetlights bend through the haze, forming soft, scattered halos. Nothing dangerous, but not clear enough to feel reassuring either. She rests both hands on the steering wheel, not driving in right away. The day has been longer than she expected. A difficult meeting. A conversation that needed to happen but didn't quite finish. An email she wrote and deleted several times, unsure which tone was the right one. When everything finally ended, she found herself here, sitting in the car, looking through the glass as if the road ahead were asking something more from her. Lily leans forward and wipes one corner of the windshield with her sleeve. The motion is quick, a bit forceful. The fog smears instead of disappearing. The wiped patch turns cloudy, warping the streetlights even more. She stops and notices she's just done what she often does in her own mind, trying to handle uncertainty with force. There are moments when, if we can't see clearly, our first instinct is to break whatever's in the way. Push harder. Be decisive. But with a windshield that only makes things worse. Lily exhales very lightly. Her breath briefly adds more fog, then fades. She turns on the air fan at a low setting, letting the air circulate. Nothing changes right away. But slowly the fog begins to thin. She opens the car door. Cool air rushes in. Lily grabs a tissue from the glove compartment, folds it, and wipes the glass again, this time more slowly. No pressure, just enough to touch. The fog gives way to a small clear patch, just enough to see the white lane line ahead. Not the whole road, just a section. That small clear space calms her. Not because it solves everything, but because it reminds her of something simple. The problem isn't that the glass is broken. It's just fogged. And fog doesn't need to be shattered. It needs to be wiped. Lily looks through that clear patch. The familiar street. The familiar trees. Nothing new. But when fog settles on the glass, even familiar things can start to feel suspicious. In her mind, the thoughts from earlier that day feel the same. Not big problems, just too much condensation from stress, from trying to do things right, clinging to the surface she's looking through. She thinks back to the meeting, the feeling that she said enough, but still wondering if she should have said it differently. She's been hitting that thought all evening, replaying it, analyzing it, editing it in her head. And all it's done is make things murkier, like wiping glass with a damp sleeve. Lily sets the tissue down and sits quietly in the car. She doesn't do anything else, doesn't turn on music, doesn't rush inside. She just lets the fan run, letting the air do its job. The fog thins gradually, almost unnoticeable if you're not watching. The streetlights sharpen. Edges become clearer. A different feeling appears. Not relief, more like less strain. She realizes she doesn't need to see the entire road at once. She only needs to see enough to take the next step. And to do that, she doesn't need more force. She needs less. If you're listening and your life feels like you're looking through a fogged-up windshield, not stuck, just unclear tonight, you don't need to break anything. Maybe you just need to wipe gently, with a breath, with a pause, with letting go of the urge to see everything right now. Lily looks through the windshield again. Not perfect. A few foggy edges remain, but the road is clear enough to drive. She starts the car and lets it roll forward slowly. No rushing, no speeding up, just moving. And maybe the mind works the same way. When you stop hitting the fog, the path shows itself one section at a time. Lily drives slowly along the familiar street. Not because she's afraid, but because there's no need to rush. The streetlights slide across the windshield now, less smeared, less distorted. The glass isn't perfectly clear. It's just clear enough that she doesn't have to squint anymore. And with that, something else inside her softens too. The urge to tense up and look harder. She arrives home, parks the car, and turns off the engine. In the quiet that follows, Lily stays seated for a few extra seconds. Not to keep thinking, just to notice that the fog inside her has settled as well. Not gone completely, but thinner. She opens the car door. The night air is cool, carrying the scent of damp grass. Lily closes the door gently, as if she doesn't want to break the calm that's there. She steps inside, turns on the living room light at a low setting. Warm yellow light spreads over familiar furniture. Everything is still there. Nothing needs to be rearranged right now. Lily sets her bag down and takes off her jacket. Her movements are unhurried, no longer following the usual get things done sequence. She notices she doesn't need to replay the meeting. She doesn't need to rewrite the email in her head. Those thoughts may still pass by, but they're no longer stuck to the glass she's looking through. They hover at the edges, blurry and not demanding. She walks into the kitchen and pours a glass of water. Drinks slowly. The coolness moving down her throat is very real. A simple sensation pulls her back into her body, a place without fog, only the clear feeling of each sip, each swallow. Lily sits down on the sofa. She doesn't turn on the TV. She doesn't check her phone. Not out of discipline, but because there's no urge, she leans back and exhales. The breath leaves more fully than before. And in the space between breaths, a gentle realization appears. Not all uncertainty is a signal to act harder. She remembers wiping the windshield in the car. When her hand slowed down, when the pressure eased, the clear space appeared. The same is true for the mind. When she stops hitting her thoughts, stops scrubbing with analysis what needs to be seen, shows itself bit by bit. No forcing required. Lily stands, turns off the living room light, and walks toward the bedroom. The light fades behind her. In the bedroom, she draws the curtains, leaving a thin line of glow from the streetlight outside. The room is dark enough to rest, bright enough not to feel lost. When she lies down, Lily doesn't search for the perfect position. She lets her body choose. Her shoulders sink into the mattress. Her back is supported. Breath in, then out. With each exhale, it feels like gently wiping away a very thin layer of fog, not on the windshield, but on the way she sees things. A thought passes through. How will I say it tomorrow? It arrives, then pauses. It doesn't pull a chain of thoughts with it. Lily doesn't open the door for it. She doesn't slam the door shut either. She just lets it stand at the threshold and then leave on its own. If you're listening and you recognize the habit of wanting to break the glass, whenever things feel unclear, pushing yourself to be more decisive, think faster, fix more. Tonight you might try the opposite. Wipe gently, with a slower breath, by letting time do its part. Fog isn't the enemy. It's just warm air meeting a cold surface. Tension meeting fatigue. When conditions change, fog clears on its own. Nothing needs to be broken. Lily closes her eyes. The darkness softens. She doesn't need to see the entire road. She only needs to see enough to rest. And in that enough, her body knows what comes next. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this story, that's perfectly fine. You're not missing anything. The road doesn't disappear when your eyes close. It's still there in the morning when the glass is clearer. And if you're still awake, that's okay too. Just lie still a little longer. Let the breath keep gently wiping what remains foggy and allow the night to open in its own quiet way. Listen for a little while, and then let everything come into view just enough. The parking lot was still dark when Marcus turned the key. The engine came to life with a low, familiar sound, steady and unremarkable. He didn't pull out right away. He let the car sit there, headlights off dashboard, glowing softly in front of him. It was that hour before morning fully decided to arrive, the sky not quite black, not quite blue. Marcus rested his forearms on the steering wheel and looked through the windshield. The road ahead was empty. No traffic, no rush. Just pavement stretching forward, waiting. He'd been awake for a while, not because he couldn't sleep, but because his body had learned this schedule too well. Years of early shifts had trained him to rise before the world did, to move before anyone asked. He liked that about himself. He liked being reliable. He liked being the one who showed up. But lately, something about that had started to feel heavy. Marcus was 41 now, a UPS driver, strong hands, strong back, the kind of person people counted on without thinking much about it. When something needed to be carried, he carried it. When something needed to be done, he did it. And somewhere along the way, he'd begun to wait. Not consciously, not dramatically, just quietly. He waited for someone to notice, for someone to say, "You're doing enough," for someone to turn on a light and tell him he was headed in the right direction. The dashboard clock glowed faintly. He didn't check the time. He knew it by feel. Marcus reached to the side and picked up his thermos, taking a slow sip of coffee. It was still hot, bitter, grounding. He set it back in the cup holder and exhaled. Across the lot, one streetlight flickered, then steadied. The light didn't reach far, just enough to illuminate a small patch of asphalt beneath it. Everything else stayed in shadow. Marcus watched it for a moment longer than necessary. It reminded him of something his grandfather used to say when Marcus was a kid, whenever he complained about not knowing what to do next. "Don't wait for the sun," his grandfather would say. "Light your own lamp, just enough to see the next step." Back then, Marcus hadn't understood what that meant. He'd thought it was about confidence or bravery or being loud about what you wanted. Now, sitting alone in his truck before dawn, it felt different. Maybe it wasn't about becoming brighter. Maybe it was about becoming steadier. Marcus rested back against the seat. The fabric was worn, molded to his shape over years of use. This truck had seen a lot of his days, early mornings, long routes, quiet lunches eaten alone. It had never asked him to explain himself. He thought about how often he'd measured his worth by how much he could carry, how much responsibility he could shoulder without complaining, how little light he needed from others to keep going. But lately, the waiting had crept in. Waiting for validation, waiting for reassurance, waiting for some external signal that all this effort meant something. The streetlight flickered again, then held. Marcus realized that it didn't illuminate the whole lot. It didn't need to. It only lit what was directly beneath it. Enough to stand, enough to move. He turned the headlights on. The road ahead brightened instantly, the beam cutting through the dimness. Not the whole road, just the part right in front of him. Enough to drive, enough to trust. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, not relief exactly, but recognition. He didn't need the whole path lit up. He didn't need guarantees. He didn't need permission. He just needed enough light for the next mile. Marcus put the truck in gear and eased forward, tires rolling softly over the asphalt. As he drove toward the exit, the sky ahead lightened almost imperceptibly. Morning would come whether he waited or not, and for the first time in a while, he didn't feel like he was waiting for it. The road stayed quiet as Marcus drove, the tires humming steadily beneath him. Streetlights passed one by one, each illuminating a small circle of pavement before falling behind. None of them tried to light the whole way. They did their part, then let go. Marcus kept his hands loose on the wheel. His shoulders, usually braced for a long day ahead, had softened. The familiar route unfolded in front of him, turns he knew by heart, intersections he could navigate without thinking. The truck moved forward easily, as if it too understood that there was no need to rush. He thought about how long he'd been waiting for something to change. Not the job, not the schedule, but the feeling that his life would somehow feel more complete once someone else acknowledged it. Like the weight he carried would feel lighter once it was seen. But driving like this in the early quiet, he noticed something different. The light he needed was already there. It didn't come as praise or recognition. It came as the steady glow of knowing what to do next. Turn here, slow down there, keep moving. Marcus remembered all the small choices he made each day that no one applauded. Getting up early, finishing routes, helping a neighbor load a box, calling his sister back even when he was tired. None of it felt heroic. None of it needed to. It was enough to be consistent. The sky continued to brighten just slightly, not enough to erase the darkness completely. Marcus didn't watch it closely. He let it happen in the background. He didn't need to track progress to trust that it was happening. He took another sip of coffee. It had cooled a bit, but the taste was still familiar, comforting. He smiled faintly, thinking about how many mornings had started exactly like this. How many he'd rushed through half-present, waiting for something else to arrive. This morning felt different, not because anything had changed, but because he wasn't asking it to. Marcus reached a long stretch of road with no lights at all. Just darkness beyond the headlights. The beam ahead held steady, revealing the lane lines and the edges of the road. Enough to keep going. He thought about his grandfather again. About the way he'd spoken without drama, as if what he was saying didn't need to be impressive to be true. Light your own lamp. It didn't mean doing everything alone. It didn't mean shutting people out. It meant not giving away the responsibility of your own sense of direction. It meant trusting that your inner sense of enough didn't have to be approved by anyone else. Marcus felt his breathing deepen naturally, matching the rhythm of the drive. In, out. The road flowed under him mile by mile. He wasn't thinking about the rest of the day anymore. He wasn't rehearsing conversations or counting stops. He was just here in motion, guided by a light that moved with him. The truck turned into another lot, then another street. The world was waking slowly now. A few cars appeared. A storefront sign flickered on. Ordinary life beginning again. Marcus parked briefly, shut off the engine, and sat in the quiet that followed. The sudden stillness felt complete, not empty. He rested his hands in his lap and closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't feel the need to ask whether this was enough. It was. The light had done its job. The path had revealed itself step by step. And Marcus, steady and unremarkable in the best way, continued on. The oil lamp didn't burn brighter than necessary. It simply stayed lit, and that was all it ever needed to do. Wherever you are tonight, I'm grateful you chose to spend this quiet time here. If these stories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever you need a gentle place to land. And now, you don't need to do anything more. Let the night hold what you can't carry. And if sleep comes, let it come.